All right, and we're live. All right, welcome everyone to the first episode of what this podcast is going to be called Digital Reflection, a podcast dedicated to giving people of queer identity a platform to just basically give their story about how their identity and about their identity and how it relates with games. I am your host, Jennifer Martinez, and for my first episode, will be joining me is Dakota Joyce. Dakota, give a little bit about yourself to the audience.
Hello. Yeah, as Jen said, I'm Dakota. We've known each other for a really long time, actually, like
6 years?
probably the end of like middle school.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like God, it's been a while.
yeah, we started out interacting on a forum, and then it developed into like Skype calls, and then more recently like Discord calls.
Yeah.
Um, but I think in relation to like queer stuff, games are sort of an interesting way to explore that. One of the best some of the best memories I have are actually with like
Hmm.
JRPGs with games,
Yeah.
which may not come as surprising.
I mean, knowing you, yeah. But is there anything else you want to give to the audience? Maybe about like what you do, how you identify, stuff like that.
Yeah, so like originally I came out as what is it like in I want to say early high school. I came out as bisexual and was sort of exploring androgyny with things like Persona and stuff like that. And at the very end of high school, I came out to um, Jenn and a circle of friends online as trans. So I'm a trans woman, and I've been transitioning for the past year, and then I've come out again as pansexual. So
Hmm.
just kind of figuring stuff out and
Yeah.
all of that. But specifically, what I do right now is I'm a college student.
Hmm.
I'm I took a year off, so I'm still a freshman actually. But the like other than just miscellaneous kinds of job and stuff, I write. My whole thing is writing. Um, and I've had some stuff published on in like queer spaces for games and stuff online. Um, and mostly talking either about like critical stuff in narrative or how things relate to me in terms of queer identity stuff.
Hmm. All right. And I guess like since I will be participating in this conversation as well, I guess first for me, obviously, back in first semester of college is when I came out to my close circle of friends um, as um, as transgender female, and since then I've been identifying as such, and currently as right now I am a college student, psychology major in my sophomore year, and currently I'm hoping towards work to graduate school and to focus on researching that subject from a psychology, video games from a psychology perspective. So I guess like for some more background, like since it's obviously a games podcast, maybe like how involved with video games have you been throughout your life?
Oh, video games are like super important to me.
Same, yeah.
They sort of have informed a lot of like I guess what I value in like kinds of just friendships and stuff. A lot of the like I've alluded to it before, but a lot of the games I play are JRPGs, and they tend to be very party centric, right? So like
Hmm.
I've always been looking for groups of friends that kind of not maybe not fulfill like party dynamics, but are definitely like a solid, really tight knit group.
Yeah.
And I feel like I sort of have that. And, um, so I definitely value that. Games are important for me in understanding like narrative. They were sort of like my first introduction to like long epic form kinds of things with like Final Fantasy VII or Persona 4, things like that.
Hmm.
But they've been there throughout my whole life, I would say.
Yeah. And I'm in the same case where like throughout my whole life, I've been involved in video games. Like I think like it's kind of been a joke with my parents that like before I even started to crawl, I was picking up a controller from watching my sister play video games.
Huh.
And like and I kind of like I think like if there was one game that like I guess like for me the constant was kind of fighting games, oddly enough, because like they offered like kind of like a space of like learning in a way. Like it was always like this system of self improvement that I could always apply to myself and kind of learn skills
Mhm.
to try to better myself in terms of like even though like it was just like just being better in myself at a fighting game. Like I definitely took those tools to uh, try to like you apply it to actual like learning in other aspects of life. But then obviously like just playing like general like narrative games, those are like definitely like ways I interacted with identity, especially like later on in my high school career up to college, and which we'll probably get into more later in this podcast.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of one thing I wanted to say with some of this. Like when I played these games originally, it wasn't my intent to go out there and like, oh, explore my identity by playing these games. That wasn't like my deal.
Yeah, this
That came very retroactively, kind of me looking back and being like, I wonder if that's what I was doing, and doing like a whole kind of like, am I
yeah.
superimposing myself onto back then, or was that really what I think I was doing? And
Well,
yeah.
well, okay. Let's go to our first talking point, and that like let's talk about like is there any ways that like games help you, and I guess retroactively me, comes to terms with our identity? Like, is there any ways you can point at like how games may have helped in that aspect?
Okay. So, I think particularly with the kinds of games I like to play, from like Jack 2 and 3 to like especially Jack 2 because it's the broody dark one, to like the Final Fantasy games and Persona and all that garbage. Um, Kind of exploring different levels of androgyny was like always really important to me.
Hmm.
Um, and that wasn't something that like it was sort of like a subconscious appeal to me. I think I've always tended to gravitate towards those things, and aesthetic choices in life started to change in high school. Like
Hmm.
I started to wear like kind of like form fitting stuff, sort of like basically tried to end up looking for like friggin' Persona characters essentially, and it was a look I pulled off okay. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like exploring androgyny sort of led me from one thing to another, and I ended up looking into more about like what gender actually is, and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So it sort of created like a baseline, but sort of like a platform for me to do like the real sort of research
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
reference point going back. Yeah.
Yeah, and same for me in that like it definitely like in the early parts of my life it definitely wasn't a thing because like the games I was playing was like Sly Cooper, Jack, and like those things. But like
Right.
definitely like later on when I started playing more RPG centric games, especially those that let you like create your own character, is
Mhm.
when I started messing a bit with like playing because like when I played those games definitely like I always treated like the avatar as like being a reflection of myself.
Same. Yeah.
So like when I and then like when I started messing around with like even in fighting games, like basically like there's this kind of thing of like in fighting games that like the character you pick is an avatar that like kind of represents you, especially when you play
Mm.
at a much deeper level. And like definitely like in terms of like high school is when it really started to happen. Like I started like messing around, like playing like maybe more like female character and like messing with the idea of like being my avatar and like definitely like did help me coming towards my identity because definitely like when I was making the Fallout character look like me when I used to identify as male, it definitely there was always something that felt kind of off. But then like when I started like using a female avatar, something just felt like more comfortable and more natural. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because I actually never did. In like I played like Oblivion is like one of my favorite games, and like I actually never really did play female characters very much,
Hmm.
until very recently in like the past 2 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know why because like playing female characters now is great, but
Yeah.
um, it's just kind of the thing of like in Oblivion I would play like the burly fucking orc, um, and I don't know why.
Hey, we all got our
um,
reasons.
yeah, and it's sort of a thing of like I think it was fun to occupy that space for like a brief amount of time because it gave it some sort of like I don't know, like sort of embracing like brute-ish masculinity, which I didn't really have at all ever. Was
Yeah,
was a fun thing to do occasionally.
yeah. I mean, that's definitely a thing with like some of my favorite games. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I currently like in Street Fighter Five. I currently play like this Kyle, who's like this big, muscular American man with like arms that get bigger as he does his attacks. and my favorite games are Yakuza. And it's like I guess like it's this thing of like knowing that like I'm kind of like just kind of like very quiet, scared of confrontation girl.
Mhm.
So like being able to occupy that space where I'm not that is definitely like exciting to like a point of like I guess in terms of like being able to like I guess in that case like being able like to occupy a space of someone who can deal with confrontation.
Yeah, yeah. And kind of just like the I guess the novelty of it too is
Hmm.
exciting.
Yeah. All right. So I guess moving on is there any specific game or moment you can point at that you feel like helped with coming out or coming to terms with your identity?
That's a good question.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, I want to say honestly, I want to say it had to deal with like Naruto and Persona 4, but that's a whole can of worms that um I have issues with Persona. I'm writing about that right now, actually.
Hmm.
Pitching it out there. And hopefully that does, because I think it's a conversation that's worth having. But at the same time, um, despite my issues with that game, I would still credit it with being, especially four, with being kind of instrumental in really engaging, or at least giving the impression for me of engaging with queer stuff, like very few games do, I think, or
Hmm.
at least did when I was playing them, in like the PlayStation 2 and stuff.
Hmm. I think for me, there's like two games or three games really that I can like point at as being like that like really contributed to me coming to identity as a woman.
Mhm.
And the first one, oddly enough, is like a game you wouldn't think is like it's like I don't is like not really like a game associated with me is the first Mass Effect.
Okay, I can see it. Mass
And
Effect
that
is
like I just like out of a whim I decided like let's play as the female shepherd, right?
hmm
And like at the time I didn't even like customize. I was just kind of because like I was kind of nervous because like I felt like because like the way I was raised and kind of like a very like gendered household.
hmm
Uh, it felt like I was doing something wrong to some like got back in my head and playing as a female character. But like so I just kind of like played it, didn't mess with the character customization, just like female shepherd, let's go, right?
right.
And something about that like it just felt like it felt right, like playing as a female shepherd. Like this is how I want my avatar to be interacting with this world.
Hmm.
And then like so like that was one thing that was kind of like one of like the stepping stones. And then the second one was playing Animal Crossing New Leaf.
Hmm.
Because even though like I picked a boy in that game like is very like it lets you like wear any clothes. Like it doesn't gender any of the clothes. Like if like you want to be like a boy wearing a skirt, it just lets you. And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
doing that like let me like experiment with clothes. Like it kind of let me like in a way like cross dress in like a safe environment and not have to worry about like being like being in trouble with my parents or anything like that. And
hmm
like it just felt like seeing my avatar, like in those clothes, like felt really nice and comfortable, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then like the third one, and like it's basically like just overshadowing like being like realizing that being in presenting as female is way more comfortable than me presenting as male. And like I think like the next time was like playing Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate with friends. And I
Huh.
remember like the first time we played together, it was my friends like Johnny, Kay, and I don't remember who else. But like I remember like when we all first got together, like we were about to go on our first hunts, and like we're all looking for each other's avatar in the overworld. And like Kay runs up to my avatar and like points out like, "Whoa, that's a girl!" And like when she said that, that felt like oddly validating in a weird way.
hmm
Like being like, "Yeah, that's my avatar," and it's a girl. Like oddly felt like felt really validating. Like,
Right.
yeah, that's me. And like definitely as a thing of like character, like definitely like in that case, like character creations definitely like helped and like giving like providing me a space to experiment with presenting that was like safe in an environment I felt like I couldn't do that on my own or behind my back safe or behind like the back of who was taking care of me safely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of like I feel like a common sort of like maybe recurring actually motif with the kinds of things that allow us to explore these things are, for me it's mostly narrative, right? So
Yeah.
like narratives that engage with these things to some extent, or at least kind of hook at them from the side. um, are very valuable for me, and because I think they sort of present characters that I'm able to empathize with.
Hmm.
Um, and I sort of project myself onto these people a little bit. Like I definitely know I did that with Chie, just because I think Chie is the greatest thing ever in
Yeah,
Persona
same.
4. But also Naoto, because Naoto is amazing and has, you know, that entire story, that entire character arc deals with sort of queer stuff because it's not very well done. Um,
You both got the same Pico.
that's true. But yeah, and it's just interesting that people can sort of like latch on to different things about games.
Yeah,
I don't like the word systems or mechanics, but like the sort of like gameplay stuff can inform these things, I think.
yeah, like definitely like for me, like just the act of having like an avatar that represents me, like definitely a big contributor for like how I feel in messing with, I don't know, or something that's important to me. Like just being able to do the things I want in the body that I feel is like my body is like very empowering for me to have when I interact with these with these games, and definitely like
Mhm.
was a big help in like coming to terms with my identity. So like in that case, like to our next point, excuse me, the interacting with the culture of games maybe helped with coming to terms anyway, and this is like meeting people online through games, interacting like maybe like the dialogue that was surrounding games. Did that help in any way, or maybe even hinder in some cases?
Yeah, definitely, both for both. Um, um, so games are weird. Like the dialogue surrounding games are weird because
Yeah.
it's sort of in an adolescence,
Yeah,
and just kind
definitely.
of getting out of that now. Like it feels like something like things are happening to raise the bar in terms of games writing and games critique. We're not just seeing these reviews anymore and things like that. And I think that's sort of having an effect on communities as well.
Hmm.
But for a while, games were really male centric, really
You can
queer
argue still
phobic.
are to some extent.
You still are, yeah. But like they were in such a way back then, specifically with me, that I didn't see it, and it felt like something that was just sort of accepted back then and for me. But now with um, kind of just the community that I'm hanging out with now and speaking to, and um, the fact that this stuff feels to me like it's more in the discussion, like
Hmm.
places like Waypoint and things like that. Um,
Yeah.
Definitely validate a lot of what I'm going through now and feel better. We still like that's not to say to absolve sort of like the steps we need to take to get better because um, part of what I'm writing about right now is the fact that a lot of the queer phobia in Persona tends to get a little bit overlooked in games writing, I think.
Yeah.
Um, like Persona is a game that it's getting like really high scores all around because we still use scores, but at the same time, like critical pieces that are being written about it tend to ignore those aspects of the game, tend to
Hmm.
not really engage with these things socially in the same way that, say, someone who is directly affected by it would.
Hmm.
And I really just think that's due to the lack of maybe the lack of diversity in writing and
Yeah.
about games and
Yeah.
writing within games.
I mean,
Like yeah,
yeah, that diversity, like especially the diversity aspect in terms of like the writing, is definitely something we're now starting to see get fixed, I guess for lack of a better word. That like like Kotaku definitely has like a very diverse with people like Gita and Heather like mountain there, or like the fact that Waypoint is being headed by Austin Walker. That
Austin,
you
the
know, like I think
grandfather.
Waypoint is the only game site right now that is headed by someone that isn't a white male, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. It's
And like that's definitely going to help in contributing and like improving the dialogue in games writing. That hopefully we'll start to see like definitely like if like the dialogue in games will definitely help others in trying to identify or like use these games as a way to help with their identity. But
yeah,
sorry, I'm just trying to get my thoughts together. And another way like that it could help is how or like the games that help at least for me in terms of the community is that like circle of friends that I interact with that have been super supportive, I met through games.
Yeah,
Like
same.
we met through like was it Screw Attack or TPS forums?
We met through TPS.
Yeah, and that was like a video game centric forum.
Mhm.
And like a lot of the friends that I interact with right now that have been super supportive of me coming out have been through these video game forums. Now, granted, like that may be like an edge case scenario of me getting lucky that the people I happen to interact with through games were also like very supportive of these topics. But it's
Mhm.
definitely like something I think I consider when I'm thinking about like how because like definitely like being in a circle of friends that like were supportive and like open to these dialogues and topics helped in like making me feel safe and coming out.
Yeah, I also feel like for me anyway, there was still a lot of resistance to that. I remember rather distinctly early TPS days were really
Yes.
horrible.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
were
Yeah. Yes.
really,
True.
really bad people,
We
and
were.
all of us, the kinds
Yeah.
of stuff we'd say, like you look at 4chan boards, and we were close, like we were really
Yeah.
close.
God. I'm glad
But
we're
at
out
the
of
same
it.
time, we have there has been a lot of change in we migrated from TPS to D2, another forum, and then the Skype call really took off and the Discord call really took off. And by now I think there are less issues of like horrible overt bigotry like there used to be.
Yes.
But
Yeah. It's
there
true.
are still growing edges.
Hmm.
Absolutely, like rough spots. Like it's mostly like smaller things, like microaggression type things
But
that do
definitely like,
accumulate and are important. But
but definitely like
um,
not the macro or like straight up
yeah,
bigotry that we
yeah,
used to.
not that.
So yeah, I guess that's something I guess I kind of accidentally glossed over. But yes, but like yeah, yeah, I get for. But yeah, definitely like at least like we found people who are willing to grow and learn at least like when like
Yes.
confronted with these topics or how we were wrong back then essentially.
Mhm.
So moving on, all right, as this is somewhat slightly related, but like did through games you meet anyone who help you come to terms with your identity? And I guess like let's open this up and like maybe like not even someone like maybe someone you met, but maybe like through games did you see someone or like did like yeah, like maybe like seeing a developer, a writer, or even like in case of esports, a pro player that like maybe help you in terms of like learning or like maybe helping you come to terms with your identity.
Right. So, yeah, there are definitely a few, like, maybe not come to terms with my identity so much as before I came out, but afterwards, sort of coping with the world that I was starting to realize,
Yeah.
things like that. Like, understanding the sort of like social, political, um, medical cosmos that trans people tend to occupy in the US and all the sort of stratifications that exist therein, basically, due
Yeah.
to kind of intersecting issues and identities. The people that really helped me out were people that talked about queer stuff.
Hmm.
So I know that, like, for example, I was aware of people like Jim Sterling, and I liked Jim Sterling back then, and he was helpful, and I do like him a lot still. Jim Sterling's great, but at the
Yeah.
same time, I didn't really gravitate towards him as much as I did say Heather Alexandra,
Yeah.
because she's she is trans herself. She's written about this. It's
Sorry.
something that she engages with, um, semi frequently in her writing. I think she wrote this wonderful piece on like representation in not just games on the screen, but also who's writing games. And she used the example of Krem from Dragon Age Inquisition as an example, as like her,
Hmm.
I think.
Yeah.
Um, and people like Heather, people like Noah Gervais was really good too. I heard, like one of the videos that sort of sold me on him was his Depression Quest video, and
Hmm.
his what is it, the Asshole Simulator video, I think,
That was a really
where
good
he
video.
talked, yeah, where he talks about Gamergate and things like that. And I think the reason why it was important for me to hear was just to let me know that people were on like my side, because especially in those early months of coming out when I was still learning a lot and still am, but like I really didn't know anything back then,
Yeah.
it was important to know that I wasn't alone. And that was because that was a big fear of me, and a lot of the experiences I had in those early months contributed to this sense of isolation and marginalization that I do experience now, but I'm absolutely more aware that people are out there and care.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And like definitely like through me, like through games, I mean like meeting you is kind of like one big thing, and that like how we both been like a very supportive structure, and like us both coming out and being, working through our identity and such.
right, right.
But like I think like in terms of like people I saw through games, I think two people I think in particular are game developer Samantha Common, who's a trans woman, and Street Fighter player Ricky Ortiz, who she is a also a trans woman. And
Okay.
like just seeing them kind of, especially like Ricky Ortiz, like seeing them kind of just exist and like work through like the space that I interact with a lot, and especially in the case of Ricky Ortiz, seeing like her like fight through all the vitriol and straight up transphobia she has to fight because like I like appreciate a competitive Street Fighter and kind of esports, but it has a lot of issues still in terms of like how it deals with like people who aren't fault kind of fit into that white male category still, like a lot.
Yeah.
But like seeing her like just basically persevere like through that like and like be very like strong like what one like like just seeing them was like kind of like seeing them first was like just like a thing of like having it under like kind of like my gateway into understanding what like like what is means to be transgender or like trans community, and then just seeing them
Mhm.
persevere was like very empowering and thinking like this is something I could do or that could be me, and that was like something very important to me, and especially helped with coming out with
Yeah.
my identity. So okay, and then like turning to the flip side, the games ever act as an obstacle to you being able to figure out your identity? Or
Whew. Yeah. um, so video games suck, right?
yeah.
um,
uh,
like um, before I came out, I was playing a lot of Metal Gear Solid 5.
hmm
Or like really came out to my mom rather.
hmm
I was playing a lot of MGS 5,
God, I was playing
and
PS5 as
that
well.
game is not perfect.
No.
That is a game that has issues. And there's sort of this double whammy of suddenly realizing that, oh hey, the world is all transphobic and et cetera, et cetera, but also like, oh, the world is racist, and oh, the world is sexist and has
Yeah.
systemic class issues, and oh god, I'm dying. Um, and
That's definitely like a thing of like sorry. Of
oh no,
like
no
coming out
problem.
of like after coming out, basically like realizing, oh yeah, the world kind of doesn't like me now or
Yeah,
something.
and and kind of just seeing that like these games I used to like value without thought and like without like a critical sort of lens, I guess, like The Witcher or Metal Gear Solid 5 or things like that. I suddenly had to take a step back and say, not perfect anymore. They're
hmm
not. I can't sort of glorify them to the extent that I did, and that was hard because I had like a lot of personal attachment to these games, especially The Witcher 3.
Yeah.
Um, but kind of realizing that like, oh shit, this thing's super tropey and has a lot of issues, but also I still love it. So
Yeah.
and the biggest one for me was Persona.
Yeah.
It felt like a big sort of betrayal almost because Persona at one point in my life I was out of high school for 2 years. I was so sick. I could get out of bed, but it was really hard. I had to walk with a cane and things like that, and so online spaces were really important to me, and so were games too, and especially Persona because it dealt with high school.
Yeah.
Kind of gave me an outlet to just get to I don't know, not get my mind off of it, but sort of like recognize the issue that I was dealing with and give me a space to explore like what high school would be like if I wasn't being tutored every day at a library without any friends. Um,
Yeah.
and so it was super important to me. Like, and then I go back to it and it's like, oh God, now I have to think about why it's really, really hurtful now. And that never made me feel like oh, I'm not going to be trans for this game. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that it was really hard to accept that I still would like this game. I'm
Hmm.
still in a phase where it's like, do I ever want to play Persona again? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm very, very confident I'm never going to play Catherine again. Um,
Yes. Yes.
um,
Uh.
but it's like, am I going to play Persona 5? Am I going to give that game a shot? I don't
Hmm.
know. I felt personally wounded by Atlas several times now because those games tend to get worse in terms of what they're doing with
Yeah.
queer issues in particular. And do I give it the benefit of the doubt, or do I even want to spend the time and the money sort of trying to reconcile this thing that I feel? And I don't really know yet.
Hmm.
But games can definitely be this sort of be an obstacle, not to coming to terms with my identity necessarily, but really coming to terms with the fact that I can still be happy,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which really sucks. So
Yeah.
I think absolutely one thing that does help though are people talking about these things, people not
Yes.
marginalizing them, and ensuring that the right people get to have a voice in these conversations too. Um, Listening to a bunch of cis white dudes talk about issues with Persona is frustrating, I would say. And people talking about like it's like a bunch of white critics like loving the movie Crash.
Yeah.
It's really bad. So
They won an Oscar, so it
yeah,
has to be something. uh,
yeah.
um, yeah, definitely like what you said is definitely something I felt. Um, the way games kind of to an obstacle is that like now when I engage with them, when like the clear transphobia that happens in certain games, like I know Yakuza has a very bad issue where that's kind of like a joke. It tends to gravitate towards of using the man in dress kind of joke a lot. That's really
Right.
uncomfortable whenever it happens, and like it's this kind of thing of like I can't like just blindly like enjoy these games like I used to, as you said. Like I now have to be critical of them.
Hmm.
But then like another way, I think like for me in particular was like I definitely kind of the kind of the whole thing like, most trans will go through like kind of feeling like am I trans enough?
Yeah,
And like that's the
absolutely.
way
Yeah.
games were kind of an obstacle, especially because of the games I played. Like I was playing games like at that when I came out, like things like MGS5, Street Fighter, Yakuza, like these very like masculine coded games, and already like video games, the culture itself is already still very like coded masculine, and like there's definitely and I was even like at the time like that was like when I was really getting into like basically like WWE, basically like this whole like thing of things I did like are very like and honestly like that was not honestly at the time like I didn't have like an understanding of gender like I do now, but like acted like as obstacles like wondering like am I really a girl if these are the things I like to participate in daily or regularly or like
Yeah.
and like that was definitely like a way games were an obstacle for me when it came to like coming to terms with my identity and like was something I had to work through a lot especially since like how important and engaged I am with games in my daily life.
Yeah.
But thankfully, through like learning more and being educated on gender and talking to people, I learned that like these don't equate to my identity, and I am who I am, even regardless that I enjoy these particular games.
Yeah. And I can absolutely I guess sort of empathize with that point because I've had that sort of I guess rhetoric used against me quite like
Yeah,
physically.
same.
Like one of
Oh,
my very first like sex and gender therapist basically said to me, like I don't think you're trans because you like these specific kinds of media, or you didn't wear a dress when you were growing up, or you don't you're not presenting what's going on there. And
yeah.
my primary doctor did the same thing. He
Hmm.
basically looked at me and he's just like, you would pass better if you shaved. Or are you wearing a wig? I can't really tell. It's like, it's kind of douchey.
No.
And because these were coming, like, I think for me, because these, in hindsight, I can say, like, oh, that's like a really mean thing to do. Like, don't do that. But at the time, these things were coming from authority. Like, I thought these people knew what they were doing. Um, and I didn't really have any sort of equipment to combat that. Um, if we're going to like put it in like I guess militaristic terms, I didn't have the information to speak for myself in
Hmm.
less military lingo. um, it felt very invalidating, but it felt invalidating from an authority. So I sort of internalized it in a lot of ways, and that was really scary.
Yeah.
Um, it's like I dropped out of, or I took a leave of absence. I did all this stuff for nothing. I felt like, but I had to really, for me, research these things and sort of understand that no, I'm really coming from a place of I know how I feel, and now having read these textbooks or read these things on gender, like I am more confident in what I am able to express and articulate what's going on with inside me.
Hmm. Definitely. All right. Well,
Also
I
taking
guess
my estrogen. Sorry,
now it's if anything, it's good for the
it's
podcast.
time.
No, you're good. So like moving on to like the next or our next question is like, has the way you interact with games changed since you come to terms with your identity? Like, this can either be
Oh
like,
yeah,
just like from how you like play them to even like, just how you interact with them, like with the culture or like how you critique them.
yeah. I've definitely taken a more critical lens to games. I'm able to sort of look not only at like games, sort of like what's in games, sort of like what the content is in games. That word content. Not only look at that, but also look at what games are doing.
Yeah.
Um, like what games are sort of saying and how games are making me feel and why they're making me feel that way. Um, I think that it's important for me now, or it's become more important for me rather, to go in understanding that games don't have to be perfect. Um, that doesn't sort of mean that they shouldn't try to do better, but that I shouldn't be starting out at a game like rating it like an IGN 10 and docking
Yeah.
points as things I don't like, crop up.
Yeah.
I can sort of meet a game on its own terms and try to engage with it that way. And then broaden scope, I think, maybe to like understanding what it means to me and in the like what it means to other games and how I relate it to those things, etc. And I feel like that's become something that I need to work on doing, and I also need to do better at articulating like the kinds of things that these games make me feel. Um, and I think a lot of that gets wrapped up in emotion, right? Because a lot of games like elicit like a visceral reaction from me, like Catherine.
Yeah.
I just don't play that game anymore. I'm not gonna play that game. And um, so I've definitely my interaction with the games has come to sometimes being just avoiding games. I don't want to be interested in like I'm never gonna play like it doesn't really interest me anyway. But I'm like not gonna play The Division. I'm not gonna play like Ghost Recon Wildlands or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, because those games are just kind of gross um, in sort of what they're saying and doing, and I don't need
Hmm.
that. Um, but I think even in maybe like a little less extreme examples, like games that are really well loved, like I don't know, like The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild has like one thing that kind of crops up that really bothers me in particular, and it's just like, oh, I'm just less enthusiastic about playing this game when previously I was sort of like ranting to my boyfriend about how much that game looked so fucking good.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was sort of, I don't do that anymore. Like, I still want to play that game. It still looks super fun. Um,
Hmm.
I'm enthusiastic about it, but that enthusiasm rather is sort of tempered now.
Yeah.
And I've definitely noticed that. And I think I think it's important to kind of for me to recognize that and try to figure out if I think for me that's a problem or whatever.
Hmm.
I need to figure out what that means to me.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I think the same for me. Of like definitely like I'm just way more critical of like the games. Like definitely like seeing like the kind of like transphobic comments that kind of happen in Breath of the Wild. Definitely makes me like knowing, especially because like I'll have to like kind of like there's all these amazing things that game is doing, but like knowing that eventually I'll have to interact with that like makes me like not as enthusiastic to play that game.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the same when I was going through Yakuza, and that like the first time it happened with the kind of man in dress joke, I was like, okay, this is really gross, but hopefully it doesn't happen again. Didn't happen again in four. That like basically going through the sequel, there's just kind of like this thing in the back of my head of thinking like, when's it gonna come? When are
Yeah.
they gonna hit me? Every time like I look at like side quests and the name of that, like I'm like looking for like tells to like just prepare myself for like if they do that joke again. So
Mm-hmm.
like there's definitely like one where like, I always feel like on the defensive entering games, like being prepared for like when they're gonna hurt me. And I guess like in a
Yeah.
less and then like I guess in a kind of like and then like again like the way like I said like how I like the character I play I like especially like in games of kind of like that I feel have like a lot of self expression like especially like fighting games
Mm-hmm.
and that like feeling like need to like my avatar needs to represent me to the fullest now and like playing Street Fighter. Like before coming out, I used to just play characters like Ryu, Guile, Cody, like all these like big buff dudes. But like now, it's like something. There's not like this tick of like something feeling off. Like this
Yeah.
need, like even though like I play those characters because like just they play like the way I like to play those games, but because they don't like represent me in terms of like how they look, something feels wrong of this being my being my way into this world, into that world of fighting games, and like it's just this constant tick that I never had before, but just now am constantly always like thinking about when I interact with these types of games.
Yeah, I went through a phase for a while of like whenever I would play games that required me, like this sounds a little lame, but like required me to play like I would always
Yeah,
feel like, am I betraying myself in doing this? Is this something that I should feel pressure not to do?
yeah,
Am I complicit in the problem, etc.? And that, you know, like I don't really feel like that's a particularly sort of, for me anyway, like a valuable thing to feel anymore, just because, oh God, I'm going to miss out on a lot of games. Um,
yeah. Uh,
I do think for me, it's important to kind of recognize that this is still a thing. Like, you know,
that
um,
yeah, like
we got a lot of Joels from The Last of Us in the wild. It's still out there.
that's definitely a weird thing to play now, especially since that was. Never mind. Um,
I still like that game.
it's,
I'm I'm still a defender. My roommate really likes Bioshock Infinite. We've had discussions. Anyway,
I feel like we could have a whole different podcast about Bioshock Infinite and the issues that game has.
yeah, yeah. Oh God.
uh, well, I guess moving on to our last question, since like obviously like how do you feel games are doing now in terms of representation? Where do you think they can improve? And like, what are some things where obviously we've been talking about it a lot, but like, what are some other like to tie them out? Like, what are some other ways you think games can improve or have been improving in terms of representing people like you?
Right. So, I think I think the biggest thing, and this is hard, right? Because logistically, it's just challenging. It's hard to write a proposal, for example, to say, "Hey, Naughty Dog, hire more of X people."
Yeah,
Like, that's a very hard thing to do because they need to like I know in university anyway they need to like hire people to like hire people.
yeah,
They need to basically get like a new committee to do that. It's like that's a lot of work. But I do think ultimately that is the goal is to have a diverse group of people making games, and that's something that we that especially indie spaces are sort of accommodating. I think like
hmm
looking at the fabulousness of Lady Killer in a Bind, for example.
hmm
You know, just kind of gives me sort of like a breath of fresh air. I think in you know, so we're sort of looking at this. for me, what it feels like is this sort of producer influenced dude broism that dominates like AAA markets
Yeah.
that indie spaces aren't necessarily held to. Um, I think there's a bit more creative voice in that space, but at the same time, I do think that AAA developers should also be held accountable to be saying like, in the case of Ken Levine, like maybe cis white 30 something year old, 40 something maybe year old man isn't the best to be taking on, this issue that he doesn't feel personally affected by and kind of doesn't know a lot about. Or to say that BioWare, yeah, the group that wrote Dragon Age Inquisition, like I know they did consult trans people on writing Krem, but Krem wasn't written as a trans man, nor was he voiced by a trans man. You
Yeah.
know, and that's kind of upsetting. He was voiced by a famous games voice actress who I don't want to like name because I do forget what I had like a couple names float in my head, but that's really upsetting and
Yeah.
still is an issue. And I just think allowing these people to have greater voice in these creations is an important step that is a costly and um, sort of drastic one in a lot of ways, but also kind of a necessary one and something that I think is an end goal.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And that's not to say that this stuff changes and becomes amazing overnight or anything like that, but it does provide opportunity for authentic voices to shine through and have a say in these discussions more so than they otherwise would.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely like a lot of your points makes you kind of say things I would have said of like definitely like representation is definitely like in the actual like creation of games is like the big way to and like definitely better our representation in games better. Like the Animal Crossing New Leaf, like that game was like one of the first Animal Crossings to have a woman heading it, and that was like one.
Mm.
And people always say, that's why like it like like I doubt like if like it had like the usual producer like had a male lead, I doubt like the idea of like having all the clothes be not tied to gender probably would not have happened honestly, and
Mm.
it's definitely a thing of like it's going to be a long process, and like I said, it's not going to be overnight. But but it is a process worth doing, definitely, and hopefully,
Yeah,
as we go further in time, as we go, this more and more companies will hire and diversify their teams, and representation will start to improve in games, hopefully.
yeah. And I know like one thing that's sort of heartening, I guess, is to sort of look at how game developers have sort of responded to a lot of this stuff, which I think on the whole tends to be somewhat positive. I would say you get like
Yeah.
companies like Naughty Dog coming out and saying like, "Hey guys, like diversity is super important to us," and BioWare BioWare doing that as well. And the thing to note is that while they will say that these things are important to us, they're not perfect. Like, but
Hmm.
Mass Effect Andromeda has that little NPC trans woman that they claim is representation when it's really not good, and it's
Yeah.
just a little NPC. Like, what? If you really wanted trans representation, maybe have like a gender slider in the character creation thing, or like a gender sort of spectrum from which to choose or something like that. Like there are better ways to represent people than, hey guys, I'm trans, but
Yeah.
here's my dead name.
Yeah, definitely.
Oops.
That seems to be all the questions we have. All right. Thank you very much for being here, Dakota.
Yeah, that was super fun. Thanks
Hmm.
for having me.
Yeah. Anything you wanna plug or say before we close up this podcast?
Yeah, look for a Persona 5 article that's going to have a lot of angry comments soon, hopefully.
And you want to point to like any of the websites you've been published on?
Yeah, I've been on FemHype. 3 articles up on FemHype over the past year. So that's all I got.
All right, and I think that'll do it for this first episode. All right, this has been Digital Reflection, and thank you all for listening. All right, see you soon.